Hi everyone. Hope you're having a good summer. Yeah, so let's get back to basics. Let's start liberation from zero knowledge. And who knows, there might even be some little bits and pieces that you never picked up on because I didn't explain it properly or haven't written about it anywhere. I am still working on the manual, honestly. It's slow but sure. All right, cool. Welcome to liberation. This is what you see when you first open it up. So let's just take you through the various sections of the screen. So here we've got the main 3D visualizer view, and this can be switched between the 3D visualizer and the laser output view. And the laser output view is where you adjust all the settings and zones for your lasers. But the 3D view is what you will be using most of the time when you're running a show. Here is the clip deck. So in Liberation, a clip is a bit of laser content. Okay, so yes, this here, you got the clip deck here with all your clips in. And above the clip deck is what I call the mini clip visualizer. And the bit that's highlighted here is this section here. So we can move the clip deck left and right using this here. So you can move a page at a time. Or I can use the cursor keys on the keyboard to go left and right. Or I can use Command and the left and right cursor keys to jump a page at a time. But you can see above here, it will show you which bit of the clip deck you're looking at. I'm going to get to the APC40 later once I've done this, but for now, these are all your clips. The entire clip deck is here, and you can view an 8x5 grid at any time. You can scroll left and right. Okay, so down here is the list of zones. And so when you turn on a clip, the zones that clip is allocated to will light up here, and you can turn them off and on as well with your mouse. Now, this is a property of the clip. So if I go to another clip, it's got its own set of zones. But if I go back to here, it's these zones. Yeah, so it's important to note that the zone enabling isn't a global property. It's a property of this particular clip that is active right now. Okay, so we've got the beam allocation here. And then down here, we've got sorry, when I say beam allocation, I mean zone allocation. And in this setup, we've got 8 zones, 1 per laser, and they're called beam 1 to 8. And then below it here, we can determine how the content is flipped into each zone. So you can see the ones on the right are flipped in the x-axis. But if I flip them, turn them off, you can see that changes it. Let's just find something that is a bit more off-center. So you can see that these ones on the left are flipped in X, but I can also flip them in Y. And you see that when one side goes up, the other side goes down. So this flip settings, again, are part of the settings for a clip. They're not global parameters for that zone. So you can have your content flipped in certain outputs without having to make new zones. And then this row of 8 buttons here, these are effects. And including this little row of 16 buttons, they're also effects. And when you turn those on, the entire content is affected by that. So this effect here changes the color of everything. I'm going to go through all of this in a moment with the APC40 because it's a bit clearer. But for now, these are your clips. These are the zones your clips are going into. These and these are the effects. And these buttons here determine the X and Y flip. Okay, so what else do we have? Up here, we've got the tempo panel. The tempo panel is kind of a critical element of live performance. And usually if you're busking along to a show, you're going to be constantly trying to maintain a tempo. So this is where you do it. You can tap tempo to keep in time with the music. There are also synchronization sources you can use like MIDI clock or Ableton Link. So if your performance that you are syncing to, some DJ software has Ableton Link or MIDI clock output, then you can automatically sync to what they're doing and you don't have to do it manually. In this panel here, we've got a lot of the clip settings for the currently selected clip. So you'll notice when you click on a clip, it lights up white. That means that that is the currently selected clip. So whenever you adjust zones and change things, they always affect the currently selected clip. You know which one's currently selected because it's got a white outline around it. Note that that's different from the currently playing clip. There might be more than one clip being played at a time, but only one will have that white outline around it. So yes, here you'll find all the properties for your clips, and then there's some global transformations as well, which you can adjust across the board. Up here is the laser overview panel. So this will show you the health of the connection to your controllers, and it will also show you the arm status for each of your lasers. Also, you should just note that there are a few settings up here, and the most important settings are up in the top icon bar. Buttons for arming or disarming all of your lasers, a global brightness setting. Note that the brightness setting doesn't affect the 3D visualizer, but it does affect the output to your actual real lasers. That's so you can turn the brightness down and yet still do an invisible preview while your lasers are turned on. This button turns on the test pattern for your lasers, and this scroller here lets you choose which test panel that is from a few different presets. If you click this little I button, it will also show, as well as the test pattern, the currently playing content. Okay, and then these three buttons here let you select between the 3D view, the canvas view, and the output view. So the canvas is a system for drawing graphics, but the output is the most important section because the output view lets you adjust the output zones for every single laser. Right now we're looking at the entire output for laser number 1. And you can see that beam zone 1 is in laser 1. And I can literally just click and drag it around. I can adjust the size and shape of it using the corner handles. If I want a non-uniform shape, I can press the Alt key, and then as soon as it becomes non-uniform, then the corner panels, the corner handles no longer maintain axis alignment. If you ever get stuck and want to go back, you can just reset to the default. But the important thing to note here is that this is the entire output for your laser, and you could have more than one zone in your laser. In fact, let's add a zone. So now we've got 2 beam zones. So this would be useful, say, if you're in a theatre venue and you have zones that are going up into the ceiling, but you might have a balcony. So you might want to have another set of zones that are a bit lower and very thin. We'll come back to thin zones later, but for now, all you need to know that this is the entire output for your laser, and it will show you every zone that is going into that laser. You can also zoom in and out using the mouse scroll wheel, by the way. And at the moment, you can see it snaps to a grid. You can turn the grid off and adjust the size of the grid using these 2 settings here. So if I turn that off, then you've got very fine control. And this number here adjusts how fine or rough the grid is. You can see the grid in the output window. Maybe you can. It's very faint. See the little dots? That will show you where the grid is currently set to. Okay, so this is laser 1. If you want to adjust the zones for laser 2, you can use the buttons up here. And you can see there's always a big number in the top left of this output window. So you'd never get confused about which laser you are currently adjusting. That was something I added way early on because it's easy to just forget which laser you're on. So that's always there just to remind you. Other useful ways of iterating through the lasers, so you can use these buttons. You can also just use the number keys on your keyboard, 1 to 9. Or you can just hit the tab key, and that will kind of go between the 3D visualizer and your lasers. If you press Shift Tab, it goes backwards. Okay, so let's come back to zoning. So the process of zoning, you'd normally, once you've got output to your lasers and you've armed your lasers, you would normally turn the brightness right down, turn on a test pattern, and then slowly bring the brightness up until it's bright enough to see. Obviously, clear your target areas before you do this. There is a quite a detailed description of how to do this safely in the manual. So please read the manual. It will tell you exactly how to arm and turn on your lasers and zone them safely. But once we're sure that the zones aren't hitting anyone or going anywhere they don't need to go, then you can turn the brightness all the way up, and then you can adjust your zones to use while they are outputting a test pattern. So the default zone type that you've seen is a quad zone, and you've got 4 corners. But there are different types of zones. My favorite one being the line zone. And this is particularly useful if, like the example I suggested, where let's say this zone is going onto a balcony. So instead of having to adjust 4 edge corners in sometimes a very teeny sort of tiny zone, like these 2 points at each corner would be very close to each other. But by using a line zone, I can easily change the thickness of the zone by adjusting the thickness here. I right click to get this menu, by the way. So there's a right click menu. I can adjust the thickness of that line. So now it's really, really easy to adjust exactly where this zone goes. Now, most balconies aren't exactly straight like this. So what you can do is press the Alt key on your keyboard. See that little plus sign appears? So now if I click on that, it adds another control point. And I can now, I'm just going to turn the grid off. And now I can adjust this zone as a curve. This has been extremely useful to me. You can also adjust the automatic smoothing level to make it smooth. Or if you're really advanced, you can actually adjust the Bézier's curves yourself. So if you're used to using Adobe Illustrator or something like that, then you'll be used to doing these Béziers and you have extremely fine control. Honestly, that was how I did it all the time. But now since I've added the auto smoothing, I find it's just easier to add points and get it to spread out across that balcony. The third type of zone is a segmented zone, and that's useful for doing graphics. So I'll perhaps go into that a bit more if we have time to look at graphics today. So within this output view, you can add zones using this button, add a canvas zone, or you can add a mask. So masks allow you to just hide sections of the output. So let's say I've got a glitter ball in the theater and I don't want the laser to hit it. So I can figure out here, the glitter ball is in this area, and then I can literally just turn the laser off for that area. There is a really useful test pattern. It's kind of a sweeping pattern. There it is, number 10. Now you can see that's just a vertical white line that's sweeping backwards, left and right. This test pattern type outputs to every single part of the zone. So it's a really good way just for you to double check that the laser can't go anywhere that it's not supposed to. The other thing with masks is by default they're 100% blocking, but you can reduce that. You can make it just reduce the output by 50%. Now, of course, only do this if you know what you're doing. You should never use this as a safety measure for audience scanning, but for things like protecting cameras or just reducing the brightness in certain areas for other reasons other than safety, you've got that option here. And again, check the manual for all the safety information about how to safely set this stuff up. All right, I'm just going to delete this. Any questions about any of this so far? Let me just see the Zoom window. How are you all doing?
Good. Seb, are the keyboard shortcut to move the masks or like the zones of like your arrow keys? Did you?
Well, thanks, Gabriel, for the reminder.
Yeah.
So, yes, so you can nudge the zones. If you click on a zone and then use the arrow keys, you can see that that is moving a little bit at a time. You can press Shift and the arrow keys to make them move a bit more. If you click on one corner, you can see that that becomes selected. So now when I use the arrow keys, it just moves that corner. And likewise, if you press Alt and then the arrow keys, then it deforms. So it's no longer axis aligned. To get your zones back to the default, you can just use reset to default. And if you do distort, so they're no longer axis aligned, you can remove the distortion there as well. Okay, cool. Shall I move on? Now, you'll see that I have my APC40 hooked up. So the APC40 it's a MIDI controller. It was initially designed to control Ableton Live, but people use it a lot for video and laser control, so much so that they had to reissue it recently just because of the demand from people using it for video and laser software. So you'll notice that there is an equivalency between the clip deck and all these buttons and the APC40. I've literally designed the Liberation screen around the APC40. They've been designed together, essentially. And so the clip deck that you see here is exactly reflected here in this 8x5 grid of buttons here. So when I push one of these buttons, it triggers the corresponding clip there. And I can scroll around the clip deck using this rotary controller here. The camera and screen is not quite in sync, but in real life they are completely in sync. This is really the best way to operate Liberation because it's just so much more tactile. So to start a clip, you just literally press it. Notice that once you start one clip, it stops all the other clips. If you did want more than one clip to run at the same time, you can press the Shift button, and then when you start other clips, the first clip isn't deactivated. There are other ways to do this as well, but that's the main way. So yes, if you did want to just stop a clip, you can just push it again. Also in the APC40 is the zone buttons. So again, I can use these buttons here to turn on and off zones. And I can also use these buttons as X and Y flips too. Now you'll notice that I have actually put little stickers with X and Y there. They don't come with the APC40, that's just me and my label maker. Well, the main brightness fader is here, by the way. And again, you'll see that affecting the brightness slider up here, but that's not reflected in the 3D viewer. It's only on the output of the lasers themselves. But the other 8 faders all control the effects. So let me just get a very simple clip running. Let's start with effect number 8, which is this one here. You'll see that it's flashing. So if I bring up the fader, but if it's all the way, then you can see that it's flashing the entire amount. But because it's on a fader, I can make that effect gradual. Actually, I do this all the time. So each of these effects does something different. You can see this one just makes everything go chaotic. This one introduces a sine wave distortion to everything. This one just literally spins it around. This one squishes it in and out again. And this one pulses the size. And these two affect the color. So you'll notice that when I bring this one up, it just changes the color of everything to the color of the effect. And this one changes the color of everything, but it doesn't affect the saturation. So anything that's white, you'll notice the white edges of this aren't affected. So each one of these effects also has a rotary control at the top of the APC40. So if we move up to these rotaries, each one of these rotaries affects the main parameter of each of the effects. So it depends how the effects have been set up. So for example, this effect, the color change effect, has been set up so that this parameter adjustment changes the hue. So I can go all the way around the color wheel through the rainbow. Alternatively, you can adjust that with the mouse by right-clicking on it, and you'll see the parameter 1 here. So you can adjust it here with the mouse too, but it's much easier to just adjust it with the rotary. So the same goes for this effect, also adjusts the hue, but different effects, like I say, do different things. So for example, if I bring this flashing one up, the parameter here actually adjusts how fast it flashes. So if I move it to the left, it becomes a very slow flash. If I move it all the way to the right, it becomes very fast. And the same with this one, the speed is adjusted with the parameter. With this one, with the sine wave, the parameter control adjusts the wavelength of that sine wave. So you can see there. And with the chaos vector, the parameter adjusts exactly how chaotic it is. So the buttons down here are also effects. They are mapped onto the APC40, but only through these buttons. So you can't fade them up in the same way that you can with the main 8 effects. But these by default are all set to adjust the color. And actually, you'll notice also that the color effects are all mutually exclusive. So when I turn one of the color effects on, it turns off all of the others. But that's just something to note, really. Okay, what next? All right, so there's a really fun technique that I've got built into Liberation, and it's called zone delay. Incidentally, you can undock any of these panels, and if you want to redock them again, drag them over the place you want to dock them in and press the shift key. So that allows you to put things back where they were to begin with. But here we have the clip settings panel. And there's various clip settings here, including the scale of the clip, which you can adjust. And you can also shift the clips left and right and up and down. So these settings belong to the clip and they are stored with the clip. But you can always just revert back if you want to. But I want to show you now something called zone delay. Oh, by the way, a lot of these clip settings are mapped onto the APC40. So you'll see down here, there are 8 kind of values, and they're displayed here: clip shift, XY, zone delay, global spin, global scale. They're shown here because these refer to some rotaries on the APC. These 8 here. So if I want to do Shift X, I can use this one. Shift Y is that one. And these are the global settings, which I won't mess with right now. But here we have 2 rotaries that control the zone delay. Now let me just bring up the zone delay. You'll see it change here with this setting, but I can also do it with this knob here. So I can bring that up. You notice that as I increase that value, that the zones are no longer all in sync with each other. There's a little delay between each one. It's probably my favorite thing to do. It's just so easy. If you've got lots of lasers, it's sort of boring if they're all doing the same thing. So zone delay is a really cool way to just make them all do something a bit different. And if I go to a static clip like this one and add some zone delay, well, nothing's really going to be that noticeable because this clip isn't actually animating at all. But if I bring up the flashing effect, I'm just going to slow down the flashing effect a little bit. See, it's all flashing in sync until I bring up some zone delay. And so the zone delay affects the effects as well as just what's happening inside the clip itself. And there are different patterns here. So by default, it's left to right, you'll see there. But I can have it go right to left. And this is also adjustable with this rotary here. So left to right, right to left, inside to outside, outside to inside. So let's take that effect off. There is also a more traditional chase type of thing. So if I turn that on, you'll see that then it's literally just like turning on each zone one after the other. And you can change the time in which it fades in and fades out like that as well. Now let's do it this, it might look a bit better. If you can make it stay on for longer than a single unit of time, to get these kind of nice sweeping effects. So yes, zone delay and chase, I think, one of the most fun creative tools to get interesting things to happen very easily. I strongly suggest you play with it. Once you've allocated the zone delay or chase mode or whatever to the clip, it is retained in that clip. So these things are not global settings, they belong to the clip. I see it as a part of the clip design. Let's talk about arranging your clip deck. This is the default clip deck that comes with Liberation. There's a lot of stuff there. And you're probably going to want to find your own clips and design your own clips. There's been a lot of contributions from other people in this clip deck, by the way, some of whom are in the chat right now. If you right click on a clip, you'll see that this one is credited to Abby. Thanks, Abby. And this one is credited to Rob. So like this little bunch of clips here are all Rob's, and this bunch of clips here I think is all Abby's, and there's some other people who have contributed, including Gabriel. Where are yours? These Fabio's? Yeah, it's Fabio. These are all Gabriel's. So thank you everyone for your contribution. I'm sure there's some more who I've neglected to mention. Who's these? Oh, that's damn lasers. So yeah, organizing your clip deck. The most basic thing you can do is literally click and drag a clip, right, to move them around. You can also pull a lasso over multiple clips, and so now you can put those and move those around and see they'll kind of shift around to fit in the available space. But one thing I didn't mention is that you can use two-finger scroll on your trackpad to scroll the clip deck left and right. I guess if your mouse has a side scroll wheel, you can do it on those as well. I don't know. But yes, so you can click and drag, scroll with your mouse, and then drop it somewhere else. But I'm not going to do that now. If you want to delete a certain number of clips, you can just literally drag them off the clip deck. You can see that little trash can appears. Let go, you get a confirmation, and then you can delete it. You can also rearrange the effects. So you can literally just click and drag those too. You can even drag these little ones up there if you wanted to. All of these effects are editable, by the way. If you want to make a copy of clips while you're dragging, if you press the Alt key, then it makes a copy of them. So now I can delete these, can't I? All right, excellent. Okay, let's quickly cover, maybe we could look at the timeline real quick. I think that's probably worth doing. In this setup, I've actually disabled the timeline, but if you go to view, click timeline. Timeline is on by default for most of you, so you should see the timeline, but if you want some space, you can just hide it with that menu option. So the timeline lets you design shows, essentially. Let's enable it here. So once you enable it, all of the controls show up. I mean, I think the easiest way to design a timeline is literally just selecting the clips you want and dragging them in the timeline, right? So there you go. I've got my show, yay. All right, let's in the timeline, if you alt click, you can get a lasso that way. And then can I delete them all? I think, oh, so if you alt click to drag a lasso and then hit the delete key, they all get deleted. So let's make, yeah.
Just one question. Can you duplicate multiple blocks at once? Like,
Yeah, so if you press the Alt key while you're dragging it, I've just literally started the manual for the timeline. So there is a lot of undocumented stuff there. So with the timeline, I'm not going to go into it that much detail today, but yeah, you essentially just design the clips you want, move them around. Note that the timeline locks to bars. So once you've got the tempo for your song, so the workflow would normally be that you can use the mouse scroll wheel to zoom in and out, by the way, on the timeline. Once you've got your song in there, you get the tempo for your song and you adjust it here in the timeline. And you make sure that the main tempo source is set to timeline. So now you set the timeline tempo here, and you can turn on the tempo map if you have multiple tempos through your song. The tempo needs to be set here in the timeline. And then the tempo source needs to be set to timeline as well. So that way, when you import your song into here, as long as the song matches this timeline, it'll always stay in sync. And because these all snap to bars, you can be sure that your entire show will be in sync with your music. I think I should do a longer tutorial about setting up a timeline show than today. It's the usual stuff here: play, rewind, stop. There's anyone who's used music software will know about this stuff. You can set the snapping on and off. You can set the snap interval here. This little man here on a skateboard is like, it means that the timeline will auto scroll with the content. This means that while you are scrubbing around your timeline, it will output to lasers. So that is off by default because you usually don't want your lasers to just come on as you're moving around the timeline. It's a sort of safety issue. So you can see now the lasers won't come on until I actually hit play. I'm calling it scrubbing, right? Which is another audio video term. And so now when I move the play head around, it will show you what the output is. This option does a loop of the entire timeline, and this number here is how long the timeline is in bars. So say I set that to, let's just say 2 bars. Then if I play it, it should loop round and round. There you go. If you want to rename your timeline, you can click on here and type the new name. If you want to add multiple timelines, you click on this little menu bar and then you get the timeline panel, which lets you select and add timelines and organize your clips by timelines. Lots of good stuff there, but I'm not going to go too deep into that right now. Okay, well, where should I go now? I probably should introduce the clip editor because that's pretty fundamental. Any of these clips, you can right-click on and edit clip. And this brings us into the clip editor. So this is a node editor. And if you've ever used V4 or Touch Designer or whatever, you'd be somewhat familiar with this node editing concept. But Liberation is kind of unique for laser content. Hopefully it's fairly straightforward to get started with, but it is extremely flexible and very powerful. So I'm just going to explain what I did there. So if you right click on an empty clip, you can say create and edit clip. So let me just talk you through these nodes available along the top. So these Sky Blue Cyan nodes create content, and these blue nodes manipulate that content. And well, it's probably easier if I just show you, right? So let's say I want to make might as well do a dot, eh? So I make a dot, right? And you can see here in the preview, my little dot output. If I want to see what that looks like on the lasers, then I can turn on the zones using the zone buttons. So if I click on this little settings icon there, I get all the settings for this dot node. And if I click on that little power button, it turns the node on and off. But what settings do we have for this point node? Well, most of the creators will have a color setting, and it uses HSB, which is hue, saturation, and brightness. Or you can just click on that and choose a color. And then you can choose its X and Y position as well. So these are all the parameters, the properties for this node. Click and drag. If you want finer control, you can command click on it and then type a number. That's pretty fundamental. I'm going to move it to the left and then I'm going to flip the right-hand zones in X. Okay, cool. So these nodes all affect the contents one way or another. Well, maybe if I show you the pattern generator, right? So I can click this one. This is a grid pattern generator. And you can see it's turned that single dot into 4 dots. So whenever I click on a node, you'll see the preview of the selected node here. and you'll see the output for the entire clip there. So when I click this, you'll see a single dot. When you click that, you'll see all the 4 dots. So this is a grid pattern generator, and there's various options, including the spacing for that grid, and also the number of repeats in the x-axis and the y-axis. There's some other stuff as well, but that's not too important right now. So now we've got a little grid of 4 dots. So now let's look at this one. So this is a rotation node. And if I click on the settings for that, you'll see I can adjust the rotation. You can see the entire content rotates around the center there. Well, that's all cool, but how do I make that animate? Well, this is where these oscillator nodes come in. So these oscillator nodes affect the parameters in other nodes. So if you've ever used synthesizers, then you'll know a little bit about these waveforms. But there's a sawtooth wave, a triangle wave, a sine wave, a square wave, a noise oscillator, and a custom oscillator. An oscillator that responds to sound input, the microphone, and an oscillator that can be controlled from outside of the clip, which is a bit of an advanced technique we won't go into today. But let me drag out one of these oscillators. So this is a sawtooth oscillator, and you can see over time it's going up this wave here. Now I can connect this sawtooth oscillator to the rotation value. So I can click on this little node output there and drag the little line, you see that, and drop it in there into the rotation setting of that. So this sawtooth wave is going from -50 to +50. Now, if I want this to do like a full 360, I can start at 0 and end at 360. Just to make it easy, I can out-click on that, type 0. There you go, hit return. So now you can see that this entire content that's being passed into this rotation node is spinning around at 360. Pretty much every one of these oscillators has a duration setting, and it's in bars. So with that duration set to half, it means it does the full 360 in half a bar. So if I want to make that slower, I can change it to 1 bar, even slower. It's 2 bars now. And I can make it go really fast if I want. That's just silly. Let's stick it to 2 bars, make it quite a nice slow oscillation. Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can do here. Let's just start over with a line, right? So I just turned the dot off with the power here. Now I've created a line. And I can make this line go up and down if I take a sine wave here, and I can connect the sine wave to the y position of the y. Now you see that the line is going up and down, -50 to 50, which is to 40. Maybe slow it down a little bit, make it go up and down a bit further. Let's have a look at some of these other nodes. Like this is one that I use quite a lot, which is a color change by position. So let's bring that into here, connect it here. So what this will let you do is select a range of colors and adjust the color of whatever you put into it based on the X position. So let's just make this a bit of a longer line so it fills the entire width of the output. And this color change by position by default is set to change everything into a rainbow, which obviously is the most fun thing you would ever want to do. So this color change by position lets you choose the start hue and the end hue, and the start saturation and the end saturation, start brightness and the end brightness. Now, if I change it so it's not changing the hue, and if I fix the saturation from 0 to 0, now you see it's completely white. But I can change the start brightness to black, to 0, and the end brightness to 255. And you see that across the width of the output, it starts with the settings on the left and ends with the settings on the right. And you can choose whether to affect the brightness, the saturation individually or not at all. It's up to you. So the wavelength being set to 100% means that it's using the entire width of that output as the gradient width. But if I change that to like 50%, you'll see now it repeats, or less. See if I change it to 25, now it repeats 4 times. I can turn the repeat off, right? So now the wavelength of that changes just in the middle section. But if I want it to repeat, I'll turn the repeat on. I can also adjust like the ping pong. If I turn that on, then it goes backwards and forwards through those colors. Let me just get that to 100% wavelength. Again, there you go. Let's type the number, why not? And turn the, yeah, let's leave the ping pong on. Now, a lot of these nodes will have this offset feature, which, it usually does something which starts from the beginning to the end, right? Usually, if one of these nodes has an offset, you can put a sawtooth oscillator on it and have some cool animation happen really without thinking about it. So let's take a sawtooth oscillator, add it to the offset, and now you'll see that is animating. I'm just going to stop that up and down movement. So yeah, by adjusting that offset from 0 to 100, you've got a nice little animation. So that's an introduction to the node editor. I'm not going to go too much further in that. I've been going for an hour. I don't really want to go too much further. Hopefully that's a bit of an overview of most things. I'm sure there's loads of missing things. Let's go back to the Zoom and see how you're getting on.
Did gloss over global adaptations and that earlier on, but you didn't describe them. That's something I enjoy. So
Yeah,
maybe mention that.
Sure. That's Rob's favorite thing here is the global transformations. So global transformations affect literally all of the output. So you've got scale X, scale Y, shift X, shift Y, spin, and spin 3D, and rotation 3D. So let's go through all these very quickly. Scale X and Y is actually mapped onto the APC. It's mapped onto, that's X and that's Y. By default, they both get adjusted. If I push the shift key on the APC, you'll see that only one is adjusted at a time. But if I let go of shift, then they both are. This is my favorite thing to do, which is if something's running, if there's a fun dynamic kind of thing happening, I can, at the end of a song, I tend to like make it go chaotic. And then as the song finishes, I bring the scale right back to 0. So you can change the scale of literally everything with the scale setting here. There's also, so Shift X and Y is not mapped onto the APC. That does literally adjust everything. And then the spin is probably the most fun part of this whole thing. So if I bring up the global spin, I'm doing that with the APC 40 rotary. You can see that starts adjusting the rotation, right? So I've got a spin applied and the spin is automatically changing this rotation value. Let's reset that. Notice when I reset the spin, the rotation is still changed. Spin 3D does the same thing, but it's kind of rotation around the y-axis, which is right up. So a three-dimensional spin would be doing that, right? So things kind of get thinner and wider again. It's a very cool effect. So if I ping that up, it's this one. Can you see how that happens? The global spin isn't affected by zone delay. Yeah, so you can see that kind of phases in and out. Now, there's this auto reset, which is enabled by default, because obviously if you're messing around with these global settings and then you stop everything, it'd be a bit of a pain to come back and have to reset all these. There is a reset all, but what auto reset does, and you can hover over this little question mark. Whenever there's a question mark in Liberation, you can hover over it to get a bit more information. So you can see what it says there. Whenever no clips are running, it will reset the global settings. So if I stop this clip by pushing the button again, you can see that all of the global settings are reset. If that isn't on, and I'm messing around with these things, then I stop that, then the global settings are still as they were. And you have to reset them manually. So yes, that's global transformations. These are kind of fun, creative tools for when you're live busking. Does that satisfy you? Yes, thumbs up. Excellent.
There's two questions on the left to be replied. Ollie asked a question about prepending clips, and then Casey's asking about can you walk through editing effects?
Okay. Okay, Ollie, you say you have a question about importing clips and prepending. What's the question?
The whole clip deck gets replaced with the default, and I have to re-import. But when I import, it adds them at the end. So then I end up having to like add a bunch of columns at the beginning, and then select them, and then drag from the end. And I couldn't figure out if there was like an auto scroll.
There is a better way of importing all your content from an older version.
Okay. Great.
So the way you do it is when you're running your older version, you go to project and export project. So the project exports literally everything, every single thing, laser setup, clip deck setup, timeline setup, everything. So once you export your project, then you can open the new version of Liberation and import that project back in.
Will that then replace any new clips that have been added in the new version at my old one? Because I kind of want the new clips as well.
Okay. All right. So if you want all the new clips, so I would first of all start with that process, right?
Yeah.
And then once you've saved your project and made sure that's all fine, then I would probably reset the default clip deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Export that default clip deck, and then go back to your project with all your old clips and append the clip deck you just saved onto the end of yours.
Got it. Okay. So the workflow for upgrading should always be export project, open new version, import project, which resets it, and then the steps you just outlined.
Exactly.
Great. Cool. Can I ask one other very quick question, a user interface one that is plaguing me? I managed to disconnect the timecode option. I dragged it out of that window, and I don't know how to get it back in.
Okay. So you went, while you're dragging it, press the shift button.
Okay.
And then those options appear.
Got it.
Thanks for that, Ollie. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. And Casey, have you walked through editing effects by chance? No, I haven't walked through editing effects. So if you right click on an effect and edit it, you have the exact same node editor as when you edit the clips. However, you'll notice in the effect, you have a single creator. When an effect is applied, this creator is replaced by whatever content is being affected by the effect, right? So that's how comes, if I turn this effect on, this node that's making this flash now makes everything flash. And you'll see here that there's a parameter node, and that determines what is affected by that rotary for the effect. And that's probably all I really want to say about that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Any final questions, requests before I wrap this up? All right. Well, it's been lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for your continued support and for joining us. It's very exciting as we get close to this final release. So yeah, thanks a lot. Continue to share all your projects and your bugs, but mostly projects.
Thanks for that.
Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. I'll see you soon.